For those of you following Diablo 4, Blizzard just dropped a major patch increasing experience on some of the dungeons as well as balancing changes to the game. We're going to go through those. There's a ton of bug fixes as well, which I won't be going through all of those. Just know that there are a lot of bugs being fixed. But we'll get into the experience adjustments and balancing changes, and I'll also have the bug fixes up on the screen, so if you want to read through them all, you can. So first of all, significantly increase the experience awards for completing Nightmare Dungeons, and significantly increase the experience gained from killing monsters in Nightmare Dungeons. So if you were someone who was farming regular dungeons to get experience because it was faster, now you have more incentive to do Nightmare Dungeons. This is something they talked about in their Fireside chat. This was implemented really quickly, so that's a good change. Additionally, Helltide chests now provide substantially more bonus experience when open, so if you want more experience from Helltides, you're going to get that now. And they significantly increase the rewards experience from completing individual Whispers across the board, so you're going to get more experience from doing Whispers quests. Another change here, the Helltide roaming bosses will now consistently drop higher quality loot. I have not gotten a single legendary from these bosses, so that's a great change. And now players can teleport to their Nightmare Dungeon directly through the map, and weekly bonus caches from the world boss no longer have a level requirement for opening. That teleportation is huge. Some of the dungeons I simply refuse to do for Nightmares because of how far away they are. That really opens them up, and being able to open these caches is going to free up storage space. We all know how valuable storage space is. Moving to balancing changes, let's take a look at Barbarian first. Firstly, Lunching Strike's base damage has been increased from 30 to 33%, and the Fury generated has been increased from 9 to 10. So that's a buff for them. Bash's Furies generated has been increased from 10 to 11, and Enhanced Bash's Fortify has been increased from 10 to 20%. And Frenzy's base damage has been increased from 20% to 22%. So those are all buffs for them right there. Flay has had its bleeding base damage increased from 36 to 40%, Fury generated from 9 to 10, and Enhanced Flay's vulnerable chance from 10 to 15%. And Double Swing's base damage has now been increased from 36 to 40%. So all the basic skills for Barb have been buffed. Kick's had its cooldown reduced from 17 to 13 seconds, and base damage dealt to enemies knocked back in terrain up from 54 to 7%. That's a big buff for Kick. Charges had its enhanced charge base damage dealt to enemies knocked back in terrain increased from 15 to 30%. And Leap's Mighty Leap Slow has been increased from 50 to 70%. So those have all been buffed as well. Iron Skin has had the enhanced Iron Skin's barrier increased from 10% to 20% of your max life, so that's a much better bubble now. And Call of the Ancients has had Prime Call of the Ancients bonus attack speed increased from 10 to 20%. So these are all buffs still for Barb. Iron Maelstrom has had its cooldown reduced from 60 to 45 seconds. Prime Iron Maelstrom's bonus critical strike chance from 10 to 30%, and Prime Iron Maelstrom's bonus critical strike damage from 20 to 40%. And Bounding Slam has had its base damage increased from 75 to 112%. So far, buffs across the board for Barbarian, not a single nerf. Moving across to legendary aspects for Barb, Bull Kathos aspects had its damage buffed, Earthquakes had its damage buffed, Dust Devils had its damage buffed, Windlasher has had its damage buff, Devilish has had its damage buff, Iron Warriors had its damage buff, and Overkill has had its damage increased, and Hellhammer has had its damage increased. So all legendary aspects for Barbarian have been buffed. Moving along to Druid, all of the basic skills except Storm Strike have been buffed, having their damage increased as well as their spirit generation increased, and other chances for other things to happen like Wild Claw's double strike attack increased from 10 to 15%. So basically buffs all across the board here for Druid except to Storm Strike. Lightning Storm has had its enhanced Lightning Storm duration increased from 4 to 6 seconds, meaning that you can keep up max lightning casts for longer in between casts, which is fantastic. And Primal Lightning Storm's chance to immobilize has been increased from 8 to 12%, which means that you're going to mobilize enemies more easily, and you have a lot more increased damage to mobilized enemies as a Lightning Druid, so that's great. Shred has had its third attack base damage increased. Its enhanced Shred healing from 1 to 2% maximum life, which is huge. Rage's base damage has been increased, and Primal Shred's critical damage has been increased from 20 to 30%. So buffs all across the board on Shred. So if you're playing a werewolf, that's great news for you. Moving to Wolves, the cooldown's been reduced from 14 to 11 seconds, and Ferocious Wolfpack's lucky hit chance has been increased to 40%, which is huge. Hurricane's had its base damage increased from 97.5 to 134%. That's a huge buff. Rabies has had its base poisoning damage increased to 76% from 53%. That's another huge buff. Cataclysm's base damage has been increased from 52 to 64%. That's a minor buff. Cataclysm is already pretty strong. Lacerate's base damage was increased from 400 to 460%, so that's a small buff there. Petrify's critical strike damage bonus increased to 25 to 30%. That's a small boost there. And Pummel has had its base damage increased from 140% to 180%. Bonuses on the passives, Bestial Rampage has had its attack speed bonus increased to 25% and damage bonus to 30%. I think that's because most people are not playing like Werewolf, Werebear hybrid builds. try and just, entice people to do that. Nature's Fury got a buff here. The chance to cast a free spell increased from 20 to 30%. That's huge. This was already easy to make use of with the aspect that, gives you cooldown when you proc this. That's going to be even stronger now, so if you're playing a Nature's Fury build, it's going to be even more strong. Lupine Ferocity has had its damage bonus increase from 60% on guaranteed crit to 70%, so if you're playing a werewolf, again, this is a boost to you. Runeworker's Conduit's had its flat damage increased. It's from 1 to 1.4, so that's a 40% increase. That's huge. Mangled has had its chance increase from 20 to 30% to 30 to 40%. That's also a good change. Seismic Shift has had its cooldown decreased from 2.5 to 1.5 from 2 to 1. And Blurred Beast has had its damage increased from 60 to 90 to 70 to 100. So more buffs for Werewolf, more buffs for Lightning here, and Earth as well. So again, not a single nerf to any of the classes here, and just buffs across the board. Moving to Necromancer, the Reap skills had its base damage increased, and Acolyte's Reap's cooldown between corpses has been reduced from 5 to 4. That's huge if you're playing any sort of melee Necro build or one that uses Acolyte's Reap to generate a corpse for like corpse tendrils or something like that. Decompose has had its base damage increased, essence generated increased, corpse form frequency down from 2.5 to 2 seconds, so that's good across the board. Hemorrhage has had its base damage slightly increased and essence generated slightly increased. Bone Slinters, base damage increased, essence generated increased. So just like other classes, pretty much all basic skills on Necro buffed. So this is buffs across the board. Moving to the core skills, Sever's had its initial base damage slightly increased and its return damage buffed from 25 to 40%. That's a lot. So if you're playing the Grim Reaper build I just put out, that's going to be stronger. Bloodlance has had Supernatural Bloodlance overpower requirements reduced from 8 to 6 cast. This means you're going to overpower a lot more frequently. That's huge for Bloodlance because you really depend on that to get damage. Bone Prison has had its cooldown reduced from 20 to 18 seconds, and Dreadful Bone Prison's Fortify has been increased by 3%. Iron Maiden's had its base damage increased to 20%. That is a 100% increase. And Horrid Iron Maiden's damage bonus has been increased from 15 to 20%, so that's pretty good on Iron Maiden. It definitely needed a buff. Corpse Tendrils, Blight Corpse Tendrils' chance to spawn a Blood Orb has been increased from 30 to 35%. Most people use the other upgrade for the Vulnerable, so I guess they're trying to entice people to use that here. And Bone Spikes' base damage has been increased from 80% to 120%. Raised Skeleton and Golem's minions will now always engage targets with a cast curse. I'm assuming that means that if you cast a curse spell on an enemy, minions will engage those targets so you can help better direct them. That gives you a lot more reason to use a curse in builds, so like Decrepify, Iron Maiden probably going to become staples in any minion build now. From when it comes to passives, Kalan's Edict makes it so damage taken during requirement reduced from 3 to 2 seconds. This is the keystone passive for minions, which made it so that they would attack faster if you hadn't been damaged in 3 seconds. This is down to 2 seconds. It's really hard in the Upper Nightmare dungeons to not be damaged for a long period of time, so I think they're trying to get people to use this by lowering it. I'm still not sure people are going to use it, though. Rathma's Vigor was also buffed. The duration you need to be healthy in order to overpower has been reduced from 15 to 12 seconds. So if you're playing a Blood Necro right now, you're going to be a lot stronger than you were before. Spike Armor's Thorns values have been increased by a little bit, so if you're playing a Thorns Necro, something with like Razor Plate, you're going to be in better shape than you were before. Actually give you a reason to maybe take Spike Armor. Moving to legendary aspects, Bursting Bone aspects, the flat damage has been increased on this by almost double, actually exactly double, so that's huge. Flesh Rending, the essence gained increased from 10 to 20 to 20 to 40. I think this is the one for Blood Orbs. When you pick them up, they give you essence. That's a huge amount, because as a Blood Necro, unless you're playing Blood Surge, you're typically not moving into these during combat. You are outside of combat, so that's great. And Fast Blood, the ultimate cooldown reduction increased from 5 to 1 to 1.5 when you pick up a Blood Orb. So you might actually be able to like seriously generate ultimate and create ultimates very regularly with these upgrades. Rogue is next. Invigorating Strikes had its base damage increased, Blade Shift base damage increased, Heartsinger base damage increased, and Primary Heights Heartseeker damage increased from 30 to 75%. That's a huge buff. Forceful's Arrows base damage increased. So basically all base skills except for Puncture increased because everyone uses Puncture. Barrage has had its base damage increased from 20 to 22%. This is fantastic. I'm working on a Barrage build right now. Caltrops has had its Chill increase from 20 to 25%, making the cold version, able to freeze enemies like in 4 seconds instead of 5. That's fantastic. Smoke Grenades had its cooldown reduced from 15 to 13 seconds. This is also really good. This is a really good skill. A lot of people are sleeping on this skill, I think. Rain of Arrows has had its cooldown reduced from 60 to 55 seconds, and Prime Rain of Arrows imbuement potency has been increased from 20 to 30%. I love Rain of Arrows. I'm glad to see this. That just makes it so much better. Folly has had its base damage increased from 70 to 105%. When it comes to passive, Close Quarters Combat's damage bonus has been increased from 20 to 30%. So there's a couple buffs across the board here. I mean, again, there's no nerfs here. Everything's buffs. And I would say Rogue got buffed probably much less than Necro did, but still good buffs nonetheless. Rogue is one of those classes, in my opinion, that's already in a pretty good place. It doesn't really matter what core skill you do. You can play really well with all of them. So seeing that they didn't get too many buffs here, I think is probably good. I'm still surprised we haven't seen a single nerf yet. Moving along to Sorcerer, we have skills that are buffed first. We have Sparks, base damage increased. Enhanced damage increased, Flickering Spark chance increased, Frost Bolts damage increased, Fire Bolts damage increased, Charging Bolts damage increased. So across the board here, buffs on all the basic skills. Also, Incinerate's base damage has been increased, the Enhanced Incinerate's damage increased, Greater Incinerate Immobilize requirement reduced to 3 seconds from 4, that's huge. Fireball's mana cost has been reduced to 35, making fire builds a lot more viable than using Fireball, since they typically struggle with mana costs. Frozen Orb has had its damage increased to 32 to 36%. Its base damage on Explosion has been increased from 29 to 34. And the Greater Orb Frozen Orb chance to apply Vulnerable has been increased from 25 to 30. So buff on Frozen Orb. Blizzard's damage has been increased. Ice Blade's chance to apply Vulnerable has been increased. Lightning Spear, summoning a Lightning Spear's maximum damage bonus increased from 100% to 160%. Crackling Energy's base damage increased, and Freezing Wake's base damage has been increased from 60% to 110%. So again, buffs all across the board for Sorks, particularly in the ice area and a bit in the fire area. Not as much in the lightning area, but a little bit there as well. For legendary aspects, Abundant Energy, chance to chain an additional enemy, has been increased from 20 to 30 to 30 to 40. Singed Extremities, the slow amount has been increased from 25 to 35 to 40 to 60, so that's a huge increase on slow. Incendiary's chance to restore mana has been increased from 5 to 10% to 12 to 17. That's huge. Again, anything for mana on Sorks is great. Snowguard's damage reduction has been increased from 10 to 15 to 20 to 25. That's huge. Concentration's mana regeneration increased from 10 to 20 to 20 to 30. Again, that's also huge. And when it comes to unique items, Flame Scar has had its flat damage increased from 0.1 to 0.2 to 0.2 to 0.3, so that's a 50% increase. And Staff of Lamb Essence had the damage reduction reduced from 40 to 30 to 35 to 25. That's actually a buff. So all buffs, again, Sork had 100% buffs. Every single class has had buffs. There is not a single nerf on the list. So there are other miscellaneous fixes in this patch, tons of them in fact. I'm not going to go through them all. This would be a 50-minute video, but they're mostly bug fixes for quests, mostly bug fixes for dungeons, things like that. So if you want to read through that, you can by all means. But this is the gist of it. The shocking thing here to me is it's buffs across the board. Clearly, you know, Blizzard heard people's feedback from the Fireside chat the other day, and they didn't just nerf what was strong, but instead buffed what wasn't. So I hope this is the start of many such patches. I still feel like some of these classes might need a little bit more tweaks, but it's a good start. I mean, you don't want them to go so crazy that then they have to like dial it back the other way, and then they're dialing back the other way. Let's do a little bit, and I think they did it. They're off to a good start here. What do you guys think? Let me know what you guys think of the buffs. What do you guys think of the changes so far? It's amazing to see it this quickly. Let me know in the comments below.